Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the next chapter in schools. I'm your host, Peter Young. I am more than honored to be joined today by Mandee Adler. She is the founder and president of International College Counselors down there in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Mandee, great to have you. If you don't mind, just introduce yourself, your organization, let us know a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So it's nice to be here. And I always like to start with a little introduction about me and how I became a college counselor. So I grew up in South Florida, which is where I'm located now. I actually attended a Title I public school, a great public school. But one typical facet of a public school, a Title I, is that we didn't have any college counseling. So I ended up getting into the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, which was amazing. But when I got there, I realized I was one of the few kids there from public school. And I started looking around and I was like, why? Where are all the other kids? What's the gig? More kids in public school than private school. And actually, while I was in college, I have a little visual aid. I wrote my first book. There it is. And I'm
Awesome.
very proud of this because I didn't write this book to get into college. I didn't write this book to make money because everyone wrote a book, they know you don't really make money. But it really was a labor of love. So what happened while I was there is I started asking around and I said, where are all the public school kids? And what I determined was that it wasn't that the private school kids were smarter or better. It was that they had this thing called a college counselor. And I was like, wow, what the heck's that? And so I put together this book to kind of bridge the gap between the public school and the private school kids. And it was pretty cool. I didn't do anything with the book. I actually graduated. I went to work for Goldman Sachs because that's what you do when you go to Wharton. It was not for me. I went to Harvard Business School. I started an internet company that I sold a few years after to Siebert Financial Corp. Worked for Siebert for a while, and eventually I moved back to Florida. And at that point, I had money and I had time. And I said, what do I want to do? And I thought back to the book. And again, I thought back to this labor of love that I didn't do for any purpose except that I really wanted to help other kids. And I said, wouldn't it be great to help more kids have the career that I had, even at that very young age, right? And I gave a lot of my career success credit to the universities I had attended. And it wasn't that everyone has to go to Wharton and everyone has to go to Harvard, but I do believe in education. And I do believe that education changes lives. And wouldn't it be awesome if I could help other kids along on their trajectory? So I wrote my second book, which is actually called International Admissions, because I felt that was another market of students that really needed help coming to college in the US. And that was great. And then at the same time, I started International College Counselors. So that was 21 years ago, which is crazy. 21 years ago. At this point, we work with students in 23 countries and 37 states. I'd say we're 80% US students. We have the international in the name, but still work with a lot of kids in the US. We have 17 counselors on staff, which is amazing. And my vision for International College Counselors is to provide best-in-class college counseling to kids wherever they are, whatever their high school is, whatever their goals are. Because we have so many counselors, I can tell you, although you might find this surprising, I specialize in sort of the type A kid who wants to go to Stanford or Penn or Harvard or whatever that might be. And last year we had 12 kids going to Stanford, 11 kids going to Harvard, 9 kids going to Penn. So we definitely have that market, but we definitely have kids who are recruited athletes, and we have someone on staff who can work with those kids, or kids who are artists or musicians. I always say to my music kids, like, I'm tone deaf. So it's not that I don't want to help you, but I can't listen to your music and tell you if you're any good or what you should do or whether you should, but we have people on staff who can do that. So I know as a team, we're very powerful. Our results speak for themselves. And just one more book. So 2 years ago, I have 2 daughters in college.
Yeah.
And one daughter's at Stanford, one's at Penn. And what I realized was that the kids go off to college and then they don't take advantage of it in the way that I wish they would. So this book was written with a HBS classmate named David Tetton, and the goal is to provide resources and information for students once they get to college so they could be successful. Again, the vision is that college can change lives. So then there's people who are like, education doesn't matter. You don't want to talk to me because I am not going to agree with you. Not only getting into college, but then once you get there, what are you going to do? So that's my story. I'm excited to be here and happy to answer any question I can.
Yeah, no, that's great, Mandy. I appreciate the context. I'm sure that the folks watching this episode will appreciate that too. Most of the guests we have on here are school-based leaders, if you will, school leaders. We've had one or two sort of education adjacent guests, if you will. So I guess my first question to you is, and you're the first college counselor. I've met with somebody who does local secondary school counseling here in the DC area, but to school leaders and to others out there, I guess my first question is your perspective as a private school consultant, if you will. Why is that a valuable perspective for folks to hear and listen to?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I know we work with about 500 kids a year. So I have a cool perspective about what's happening all over the world and also, not just in one high school. So that's pretty neat. I uniquely know, I mean, I personally don't work with the 500 kids a year, but let's say I work with my group. And then, of course, as a company, so one thing as a company, we do review all of the kids. So
Right.
I do see a lot of what's going on. Just understanding what's happening in the market, understanding what parents are thinking. Historically, college has been a very important lever as far as families choosing a private school, for example, or even a public school or choosing a high school period. So what are parents thinking? What are they thinking? Who is successful? What do they need to be successful? I can tell you I'm a terrible TikToker. I tried that or whatever, because so much of it out there is just garbage. So helping families really break through like what's real and what's not based
Right.
on 500 kids for 21 years and not based on like crap or one person's
Right.
experience. I think it's pretty valuable.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. So I guess follow-up question, because I like to listen to what the guests are saying and really take what they're saying and go with it. So you said, quote, sort of, what the market is showing and what's happening in the market. So I guess my question is, what is happening in the college market or landscape, if you will, today?
Great question. So just 2 days ago, I was in Barron's talking about international admissions and what's happening over there. And one of the things I'll say is a lot of American students are now looking abroad for college. That's a new, for me, it's been a new upward tick. And I think statistically, it's a big upward tick also where parents are fed up with the cost of education here in the US. Maybe want their kids to have a more global perspective. And so certainly starting to look abroad. On the same token, so US students looking to go abroad, or at least adding that to their list. With that in mind, I can also tell you based on experience, even though they might get into colleges abroad, most of the students don't choose to go to college abroad
Oh,
because
interesting.
the social experience is so different and they don't necessarily want to give up the American experience. So if they can have the option here in the US, they're choosing that. The other thing is that all of my international students now are adding a school outside the US because they're worried about whether or not their visas will come through. I can tell you that all of our students' visas came through, and a lot of that, at least from my perspective, and again, I think I was in Bloomberg about this, a lot of hype, like a lot of people trying to say like it was much worse than it was, because from my experience, again, it was, but we certainly are adding schools outside the US. So I think the global nature of college is
Mhm.
certainly a new trend. Another very big trend for our students is the fact that standardized tests are back. So we actually started a sister company called Bright World Tutors that does tutoring for our families because no longer is test optional really an option for most families. And even if it's test optional to get into college, it might not be test optional for the scholarships, or it might not be test optional for the public school in your state. So the tests are coming back, and quite frankly, I'm not upset about that. If anyone wants to have a
Sure.
conversation about that, I'm a big fan of standardized tests. And then the third thing I would say, the affirmative action changes have really impacted college admissions. So this is the second year we're going to see the impact of that, but last year it certainly impacted where the students did or did not get in.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, for sure. You mentioned earlier, again, working with about 500 students over a period of time. You obviously then have perspective in terms of, again, whether it's independent and or public schools across the country, internationally. So I guess my next question is, when you look across, and again, not that you're an expert in every school, but like the schools that are doing, quote, well in terms of students leaving their institutions and heading into college, and then maybe some schools that aren't doing well, what are maybe the one or two or three main differences that you're seeing between those schools?
I'm not sure the difference is so much in this. If I was really going to answer the question, the difference is less about the school and more about the student, right? So it's
Got it.
about the student doing the best they can in the environment they're in. Families really don't give enough credit to the college for understanding the environment, right? There's so many ways that a college can know about a child's environment. So I would say the biggest thing is your child in the right school for them? And it could be they need a bigger school or a smaller school or something along those lines. And that might include, right, depending on what college you're applying to, if you have a child who wants to go to MIT, does your school have the STEM classes they need? And if
Got it.
not, are you going outside the school in order to get that? Now with online, you really can find everything everywhere. So it might make it more challenging for the child and the family, but certainly, there are ways to supplement now in ways that wasn't before. But I'd say the issue is less about the school and more about the child
Got
and,
it.
and parents not understanding the real levers for getting into college and thinking that I actually speak at Harvard Business School every year. And the joke I give is that your child can cure cancer and not get into Harvard.
Yeah.
And the parents are like, oh my God, my kid can cure cancer and not get into, what is this? And I said, but if your child is valedictorian, your child doesn't need to cure cancer, right? So there's all this information like my kid needs to be published and my kid needs, no, your kid needs
Right.
to do well in school and get good grades in hard classes because you're applying to school. You're not applying to community service world. You know what I mean? Like it's
Right.
so a lot of the levers that you hear online are just factually not true. And so if we can just take away that noise and have families focus on, again, we have enough students who get into these schools I've never had a kid cure cancer, but I've certainly had plenty of kids do amazing things, usually that their parents have done. And at the end of the day, that doesn't compare to a kid who just did really well academically. And,
Right.
that's
Yeah,
the.
no, I think it's a super valuable perspective for especially parents to hear. Again, I'm in the DC area. Both my children currently go to independent schools. My daughter's a sophomore in high school, and you're right. I think the parents oftentimes either take on the pressure and or want certain things for their kids, and it may not be what's best for the kid. You know what I mean? And I think you're right. They say you need to go cure cancer as opposed to really just sort of doing your best in the harder classes, like you said, and sort of letting them be their own person, if you will.
Well, I'd say the stuff outside the classroom a lot of times is what the parents can control, and the colleges know that, right? So it's really and that's really hard, is that your child's piece you can't do, and that's the most important piece, right? So the cool thing about our company is we work directly with the kids, and I would say like why hire an independent counselor? I mean, so I would say that one of the biggest gifts I gave myself was not having to talk about college with my kids. Like I didn't have to nag them. I didn't have to tell. I had some person who was like, Rebecca, that was I don't give a shit if you go to Stanford.
Right,
I'm sorry.
right,
I don't care where you go to college.
yeah,
It's
right,
not, whatever. But I'm going to let you know if you don't get A's, you're not going. Full stop.
right,
Whatever. And that's a very, and so that goes back to my background at public school was that I felt like, and not that going to Wharton was bad or whatever, but there were other colleges I want to go to that I didn't get into. And I felt like it was because I didn't know what I needed to know. So I
sure,
say to the students, like, it's not that you have to do what I tell you to do, but you will not look back and say, nobody told me. You will
right,
not be
yeah,
confused, right? Like,
right,
I have enough data to tell you exactly what you need to do, and you will not be confused. And then if you choose to
right,
do it and you choose to decide to go to camp and say, totally cool, and I will love
right,
you and I will support you, but I don't think you're going to go to Caltech if you're going to spend nine
right,
weeks every summer. And I was like, I just can't
right,
do it. I'm just letting you
right.
know. And it doesn't mean you have to go to Caltech. So just, I will love you and support you. So I think that's the answer is
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
child
I think
ownership and yeah.
no, for sure, yeah, and I think right, parents need to be realistic with themselves, with their children. The children need to be realistic with themselves, and I think oftentimes having that neutral third party voice, not the student, not the parent, but this other person, like you're saying, can lend a lot of perspective and credibility to the work they do, but also in terms of supporting that student, getting into a school that they really want to get into, but a realistic one too, right? Sort of like you were saying. So here's my elephant in the room question. As you know, I get over the last couple of years, this question is out there: is college worth it? Right? From a financial perspective, from an ROI perspective, what are you actually getting? Obviously, now with the advent of AI over the last 2 years, but really, I would say in the last couple of months, in terms of some of these coding platforms, so on and so forth. From a content perspective, there's almost any piece of content you can learn online these days, right? So I guess I'll ask you the same question that's just sort of out there in the ether: is college worth it?
So so worth it meaning for the price, right? So I would say if a family has to take out $500,000 for college, there's a better way. So in the US, quite frankly, you can go to college for a very inexpensive price, right? And if you stay in state, you do the community colleges and you work your way off, and then you can still become a doctor, a lawyer, Indian chief, whatever the heck you want. You can do that by going to public colleges. So if we assume the worth of, so taking out the price, because we know that there's a public route, I'm going to push back and be very controversial. I think it's child abuse not to give our kids an education. I think we live in a very wealthy country. Of all the things I can provide my child, I think an education is probably number one, or no, I guess safety and food and whatever, but an education is the most important thing and that's my value, can give to a kid. Can they become a plumber and skip college? Sure. Do I think they're better off having a well-rounded education and then becoming a plumber? I do. Like, why would I give them 2 hours online of school instead of a full day where they can work with people and students and try all kinds of things and do all kinds of things? Like, in what world is that better? Like, and so if we say it's just about money, okay, so we have this free education, so then is it about time? I mean, if the kid is indigent and the family needs the money, I get it, because then again, they can't afford to go to school. But assuming you can afford to go to school, what a bigger gift than to teach your kid to love literature or art, or, I mean, I'm tone deaf, but the kids who love music, like,
Right.
why would we not do that?
Right. Yeah. Let me ask you this as a follow-up, and this is just what I've been hearing, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. I guess recent sentiment is that students should be thinking about more of like the humanities and being a quote well-rounded student as opposed to going to fill in the blank business school or whatever those fill in the blank schools may be. Agree, disagree, somewhere in the middle. Again, I'm not saying I agree or disagree. I've just heard that recently and curious to get your take on that.
So the good schools that I know of and the ones that we have in the US that are accredited, right? So don't go to a crap school, but assuming you go to your public school, you go whatever, those schools are adjusting for AI, right? They are teaching you to think in business school. They are teaching you the skills that you need. Do I know exactly what's going to happen in 5 years? No. Like, do I know exactly what? No. But do I think the colleges are trying to get it? Yes. Do I think the kid who has a computer science degree from Stanford ahead of the kid who decided to study the humanities when the time comes to do computer science stuff? I think so. So again, I think so the secret to success, as far as so if you think about it, right, I'm a Harvard MBA doing college counseling. Like, you would not believe the eyebrows I raised over time, right? Like, this is what you're doing. And I didn't care, right? Because it was my
Right.
passion and I believed in it. And clearly I've been very successful not listening to what I'm supposed to be doing, right? So on the same token, if we can educate kids, help them follow their passions, however you want to define passion, their talents, their interests, what a gift, and somehow
Right.
they'll figure it out. And maybe if they don't become a computer scientist and they become a college counselor because they're really good at those skills, at the very least, we've given them the education to make that pivot. So anyway, I think however we educate the child, a well-rounded education to me, and that's what the US provides versus other countries, right? So one of the reasons one of the reasons our parents keep our kids in the US is because you can have that well-rounded education. You go to Europe, you're studying pre-med, you're studying whatever.
Got it.
I don't think that's as
Yep.
good.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. You mentioned earlier in terms of not necessarily private versus public, because that's the wrong way to think about it. I benefited from going to independent school, K through 12. Went on to Vanderbilt, the private university. Both of my kids are currently in independent schools. Is there difference is the wrong question. But fundamentally, what do you see as the difference in terms of kids coming out of public versus private school? And I don't mean like, are they getting into Stanford or not getting into Stanford? But in general, what are maybe some of those differences you're noticing in terms of either level of preparation for certain kinds of colleges, universities, or just in general? What are some of those differences? Because again, there's a core group of 7 of us that all went to Vanderbilt together. Some of them went to public high school ahead of Vanderbilt. Some went to private. Now as adults, some of our kids are in independent schools, some are in public. And so we continue to have this internal struggle conversation, if you will. Not to say one's better than the other. We acknowledge they're different. Obviously, the most glaring difference is the financial piece, but in general, what do you see as the main differences between, let's say, a really good public education versus independent school education?
It's a great question. So after 21 years and also a book on public schools, I can tell you with 100%, I seem to be very certain today, there are good public schools and bad public schools and good private schools and bad private schools. Public schools, for the most part, are better regulated. So you have you can be sure of what your child is getting. But again, there are amazing public schools and amazing private schools and really bad ones as well. I will tell you, when I dropped my kids off at their independent school, actually, when they were younger, I used to say a prayer and thank God that I was able to do this for them. That it was the biggest, I was so proud. And so it was the biggest gift I could give my children. And it wasn't easy when we first started out to when they're in pre-K and you're paying whatever
Right.
amount of money to send them to
Right. Yeah.
school. My husband just starting out, we're young, right? It was
Yep.
not nothing. But in my area, I didn't have a public school option. Did
Got
I
it.
try to find a public school option? Absolutely. And quite frankly, if I grew up where I grew up before, I probably would send my kids to public school because it's an amazing public school and awesome. But my specific area, I'll say it does not have a public school option. So I think there's a big attack right now on public schools, which I think is a problem. So the wealthy families or the families who can afford it are just going to move their kids out. But, I can assure you there are a lot of really, really bad private schools, probably more than really, really bad public schools. Just
Got it.
nobody hears about them and nobody knows.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point. No, for sure. No, I appreciate that. I want to go back to what you had said about colleges adjusting for AI. I guess, like I said, my daughter's halfway through her sophomore year, so we're starting to get sort of in it, if you will, and that'll ramp up over the summer into junior year. But obviously, in the age of AI, hot button topic is, students using AI for their college admission essays. Students have the ability to run it through different models to try to change it so then colleges can't detect that it's AI. Again, in the work that you're doing, the students that you're talking to, families you're talking to, I guess A, is that coming up in conversation? B, how are you all tackling and or sort of giving advice in that arena as those families and students think about college essays, college admissions?
So this is more like fake news.
Yeah.
So yeah, kids are now turning in essays that are grammatically correct, and as they always should. And in the past, maybe they had a teacher who made it sure it was grammatically correct or whatever. At the end of the day, it's the content that always mattered. So going back to your kid can cure cancer and not get into Harvard, your kid can write like Hemingway and not get into Harvard unless they're
Right.
applying for writing and they've won all writing awards and they really write like
Right.
Hemingway.
Sure.
But it is not a creative writing competition. What I often do is I send families like really like mediocre written essays that get kids into Harvard and Stanford because at the end of the day, number one, and I know people say this, but I will tell you it's 100% true. If
Yeah.
you've done this a long time, you know what a 17-year-old writing looks like. Even the
Correct.
smartest 17-year-old, I know exactly what that looks like. I don't know if they've used AI to fix the grammar and stuff, but like I know their thought, like there's just even the smartest, and I work with the Davidson scholars, which is the top 1% of students. Like I know how they write
Right.
because they're still kids. And then the second thing
Right.
is it's still the content. So the cool thing, and actually I think that's better because in the past, your child's English teacher was a better writer and the other kid didn't have an English teacher who can check the writing, who knows? But now it's really content. So maybe they're just going to start moving to bullet points. I don't know, but it's still content. So it doesn't really change anything.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's fascinating because again, yeah, I think you have such a unique perspective. I'm a lifetime educator until recently. My wife's been a lifetime educator until recently, but yet, we don't have the perspective that you have, right, in terms of that kind of thing. And so again, and others potentially watching this episode probably don't have the same perspective as you do. So I think it's appreciated. As we get ready to close here, Mandee, I guess second to last question is advice that you would give to students, to families, maybe like myself, where maybe they're starting to think about the college admissions process. What advice would you give to them? What advice would you give to schools and school leaders, right? So if we have school leaders who watch this who are saying, okay, they're looking at their college counseling group within their school, thinking about how do they get their kids into college, what advice would you give them? And then lastly, I will give you the final word to let everybody know anything else that you want them to know about yourself personally, professionally, and then I will thank you for your time.
Thank you. I mean, all I can say is obviously I really value education and college is a school. So if you really want to help your student and you want, as whether you're an educator or a school or a parent, focus on school. If they don't like school, then that's something to think about for college and maybe they should go to a trade school. And again, we'll love those kids too. But at the end of the day, I think the more academic opportunities we can bring our kids, the more money we can put into education for education's sake, to me is amazing. The more we can teach our kids to read books and to learn art and to learn music, I think will make them more prepared for the future. When I was at Harvard Business School, they used to say like, we're not teaching you accounting, you hire an accountant. You need to think about the big picture. And my dad was an accountant, I love accounting, so I don't think that's a trade. And I think we should still have trades, but I think having the people who can oversee the accounting and understand the accounting and understand the business and the other side it's such a gift we can give our kids. And I think in a country with this kind of wealth, to not provide that to I think we will look back and regret. I don't think we'll look back and regret a lot of things, right? But I think we'll look back and regret not, as parents, not educating our kids.
Sure. Yeah. And then lastly, again, anything else that you want folks to know about you, just to sort of close the loop here, and then I'll thank you for
Yeah.
your time.
So I run International College Counselors. We love working with families all over the US, all over the world. We try to provide very, very personal information. As you can tell, it's not just about the college, it's about the kid and giving them the love and the attention. This summer, I have 4 weddings of former students, which is
That's
such
amazing.
an exciting thing for me. And I think it shows that it's more than just, or it can be more than just, again, like an end result. It can be a mentoring relationship where kids grow, where kids learn to feel good about themselves, where kids have a meaningful vision for their future. And yeah, it's just I would say it's a real privilege to be an independent college counselor.
Great. Thank you again. Mandee Adler, founder and president of International College Counselors. Thank you again for your time, and enjoy your day.
Thank you too.